What early warnings did flood-hit Texas receive? Nearly 80 people have been killed after devastating flash floods swept through parts of central Texas. Rescue efforts are ongoing, and the total number of casualties remains unconfirmed, though officials warn the death toll will rise. Questions have been raised about whether adequate flood warnings were provided and why people weren't evacuated ahead of the deluge. Most of the fatalities, including 28 children, were in Kerr County, where a girls' camp was inundated. Judge Rob Kelly, the top elected official in Kerr County, told CBS the severity of the flooding had been unexpected. "We had no reason to believe that this was going to be anything like what's happened here. None whatsoever," Kelly said. The flash floods began on Thursday night and continued into Friday morning, with meteorologists saying several months' worth of rain fell in just a few hours. Within the space of 45 minutes, the Guadalupe River rose by 26 feet, 8 mt, causing it to burst its banks. On Wednesday, the Texas Division of Emergency Management, TDM, activated state emergency response resources because of increased threats of flooding in parts of west and central Texas. On Thursday afternoon, the National Weather Service, NWS, issued a flood watch that highlighted Kerr County, central Texas, as a place at high risk of flash flooding overnight. At 01:14 local time, 06:14 GMT on Friday, a flash flood warning was issued for Kerr County. At 04:03 local time, 09:30 GMT, an emergency flash flood warning was issued for Kerr County, followed by another for the Guadalupe River at 05:34. Was there a failure to warn people? At a news conference on Sunday, Governor Greg Abbott said people in Texas are used to flash flood warnings. But there's no expectation of a water wall of almost 30 feet high, he added. Nim Kidd, chief of the Texas Division of Emergency Management, told reporters, "You have areas where there is no cell phone coverage, plus some coverage. It doesn't matter how many alert systems you sign up for, you're not going to get that. The public can get desensitized to too many weather warnings," said Kerrville City Manager Dalton Rice, according to the Associated Press. He said he didn't notice any problems and that it was only raining lightly at 03:30 Friday when he went jogging along the Guadalupe River Trail. But by 5:20, the water had risen so fast we almost weren't able to get out of the park, he said. Judge Kelly said there is no county-administered warning system in the area because such systems are expensive. He said that about 6 years ago, before he took office, the county had looked into a flood warning system along the river, similar to a tornado warning siren. Because of the cost, however, it was never implemented. The NWS said it was heartbroken by the tragic loss of life in Kerr County and defended itself. On July 3rd, the NWS office in Austin, San Antonio, TX, conducted forecast briefings for emergency management in the morning and issued a flood watch in the early afternoon. Flash flood warnings were issued on the night of July the 3rd and in the early morning of July 4th, giving preliminary lead times of more than 3 hours before warning criteria were met. After some officials in Texas appeared to blame the NWS for underestimating the rainfall, former Weather Service officials told the New York Times newspaper that the forecasts were as good as they could have been, given the huge amounts of rainfall and storms' abrupt escalation. Did staff shortages at the National Weather Service affect flood warnings? Before the tragedy, there had been concerns over the Trump administration's budget cuts to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, the government agency that operates the National Weather Service. The fiscal year 2026 budget includes cuts and closures of some weather research laboratories, while the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, has slashed hundreds of employees at NOAA and the NWS. Meteorologists in the US and elsewhere have expressed concerns over reduced number of weather balloons that observe wind, relative humidity, and pressure above the ground. They claim that budget cuts have resulted in 20% fewer weather balloons being released for such observations, impacting the accuracy of weather forecasting. The New York Times reported that critical positions of the NWS were vacant on Friday morning, with some experts questioning whether staffing shortages had impeded the agency's efforts to coordinate with local emergency managers. However, Tom Fahey, legislative director of the NWS Employees Organization, told NBC News, "The WFO's, weather forecasting offices, had adequate staffing and resources as they issued timely forecasts and warnings leading up to the storm."